so first we're going to take our clay and we're going to split it into half. It came to you in a little brick, so I want you to pull it into half like this. All right? And we're going to pat it into a pancake in the palms of our hands, okay? Okay, my pancake is about this thick. I'm gonna hold it up a little bit closer to my camera so you can see. See that? We don't want the pancake to be too thin at this point because we're gonna paddle it thinner on our anvil, all right? I'm gonna show you what I mean by that in a minute. Well, right now. All right, so grab your anvil. It looks like this. On one side of your anvil is a tennis ball, or it could be a gourd depending on which one you grabbed, but mine's a tennis ball, so you can see it bounces. And the other side is just a wrapped t-shirt. So the wrapped t-shirt side is the side you hold in your hand, and the tennis ball side is what we're gonna actually use to shape the bottom of our pot. All right, so we're gonna take our clay pancake that we just made, we're gonna put it down like a little hat on top of your anvil. See how that looks? It's just like a little beanie hat for your anvil. And the reason why you don't want to pound out the pancake in your palms too thin is because what we're about to do is we're going to take our paddle or wooden spoon. Mine's not a spoon, but some of you have spoons and they work equally well when we're using clay, so don't worry about it. Mine's a paddle. And we're going to hold the anvil in your hand. You don't want to hold it actually on the t-shirt side right now, but you want to hold it like around the neck like this, where the rubber band is, or where it's thinnest. Putting our clay on like a little beanie, and we're going to start paddling out the clay, which is going to make it a more consistent thickness, and it's going to make it a little bit thinner. So you're going to start at the top of your anvil's head here and pound it straight down. So I'm just pounding. I'll hold it for this way for you so you can see it. I'm starting like this. And it's not really a pounding and it's not really a slapping, it's a tapping, all right? And I'm gonna slide my fingers up the sides of the anvil a little bit to get a better hold on it, and so it doesn't move. Start there. Do it a little bit, but don't slap the heck out of it because the clay's gonna get really thin and you're gonna slap a hole right into the middle, or tear a hole right into the middle of the clay. All right, because this is just the beginning of making the pot, guys. This is just the beginning. So you don't want it to become too thin right in the beginning. Okay. Go around. Once you have done the top of your beanie, go around on the sides. And you can turn the anvil to do that. Or you can turn the clay, because the clay shouldn't be sticking to the t-shirt. That's why we have the t-shirt on, wrapped around the tennis ball. It's absorbing some of the moisture in the clay, which means it won't stick. All right, I don't want it to get too much thinner than that. I'm gonna take it off of here just to show you sort of what that looks like. Looks like a little bowl at this point. And it's all uneven. Don't worry, it's gonna be okay. But the thickness is still pretty thick down at the bottom, which is good because we're still going to be using and smoothing out the clay as we work on this project together, okay? All right, so that's kind of the beginning step. Now, to get our pot to be taller, like this pot, I made this pot yesterday. This is what the clay looks like after a day of drying. It's hard, but not completely dry yet, because you can see it's still very dark. All right, so you can take a look. That's where we're heading and where we are right now, okay? So to get here, we're gonna need to make what's called a coil, or a few coils. So here's the clay that was left over from the beginning. I want you to split it into thirds, and you know that means split it into 3 pieces, right? So that kind of looks like this. It doesn't have to be perfect into perfect thirds, guys. Don't worry about it. All right, but that's sort of what we're going for, because we're going to try and shoot for 3 coils. So this is the clay that's going to make up our 3 coils. All right, We'll take one chunk, 1/3, and we're gonna roll out a snake. Not a big fat snake, but a fairly thin snake. It'll be about the thickness of a skinny Crayola marker, all right? And here's where we're at, because we want it to be long enough to go around our pot once. I would say this is pretty close to 12 inches. I'll get a ruler out for you. Yep. Oh, look at that. It's 12 inches. All right. Yours does not have to be 12 inches, but that's what mine rolled out to when I was going for this thickness. All right. But I'll pull over my little bottom half of my pot, and without doing anything else, I'm just going to measure it. All right. And I'm going to measure it around the top rim. And I have a little bit extra, which is fine. I'm gonna rip it off for now, because we're just gonna do coils about the size of the rim one at a time. Stack them. So I had this left over. Yours might be different, okay? Your coil might not be 12 inches, and the rim of your pot might be wider at the beginning. That's okay. Just go with it. All right. But we're just measuring, so I'm gonna pull it off. And this is where you're going to need your water. All right. So grab your water, dip your finger into it, your forefinger, index finger, and I want you to get the belly of your snake wet. Just not super dripping wet, just a layer of wetness there. We're going to take that coil, we're going to put it down on top of the rim here, straight down, because the placement of your coil determines where the shape of your bowl goes, or the shape of your pot goes. So if you put a coil straight down on top, it's going to build your pot like a cylinder, which means straight sides, right? If you, for example, put your coil out wider, your pot will start to go out like a bowl. Do you see how suddenly putting the coil sort of on the outside of the rim a little bit, tilted out, widens the top rim, widens the opening. If you want to narrow your pot already, you place your coil on the inside of your rim. All right. So for the purposes of this project, because we're making 3 coils, the first coil I'm going to put right down on top of my rim. Wet side down, because the wet part of your snake's belly, or your coil's belly, is going to glue it down to the form that we made initially. Can you see that? The wetness starts to glue it down, but that's not completely glued, okay? So what needs to happen next is we're going to take this popsicle stick and we're going to start smoothing out that line. Now, if you don't do this, it's likely that your coil is going to pop off, because the water is just not always enough to glue clay to glue permanently, okay, before it goes in the kiln. Now you can use a popsicle stick, and if you don't like how that's working for you, if you're struggling with that, or the clay's not responding well to you, that's okay, and it's not a problem. Use your thumb. Now, don't worry about making these spots perfect, okay? We're gonna keep working on it. This is just the first couple steps of the construction of the pot, all right? Guess what? We're gonna make another coil. Here we go, ready? Same size, put this over here. And any of your extra bits that you cut off from your first coil, smash them in to this next one, make a snake. Here's what it looks like for scale. This is a fat popsicle stick. This is how big my coil is. You don't really want it any thinner than that. As I rolled it out, it ended up being quite a bit longer than my first one. My first one was 12 inches. This ended up being about 15 and a half. Okay? So it'll vary. So don't feel beholden to the numbers that I'm giving you on size, okay? Because yours might be different. All right, next, get it wet. See where we end up. Now, for this coil, I'm gonna start moving the coil in a little bit because I sort of want my pot to have a little bit of a shoulder like this one does. It goes in like this. And that comes from the placement of the coil. So rather than putting the coil directly on top or on the outside of the rim, I'm going to place it inside of the rim. And I'm going to pinch off the excess. Okay? I'm not going to mess around with that right now, and I'm going to save it for my next coil. All right. And now what do? We start smoothing out the line and attaching the coil by smoothing out the clay on the outside, attaching it to the body, the bottom half of your pot. All right. And like I said, I like to use my thumb, so that's what I'm going to do. All right, based on the shape of the pot right now, let's see how much we're gonna get out of this coil. I'm gonna keep bringing it in for a shoulder, but I'm just measuring right now. I haven't gotten it wet yet. I think I'm gonna get maybe 2 more coils out of this. That's what it looks like right now, okay? Which is sort of the shape that I'd like to go for. You see that, how it has a shoulder that heads in? This would be the shoulder. If you imagine your pot is a human form, the head would be up here, and the neck and the shoulder that heads down to the base. All right. So, like I said, I think I'm going to get 2 coils out of that. I'm gonna compress it just a little bit, which means just a light bit of pressure on the coils to make them sort of start to stick. And then you know what to do. We gotta get rid of these lines, all right? We gotta start binding them to the body of the piece, okay? And the way I'm holding it is either I have it, I'm left-handed, so my dominant hand is usually, in ceramics, is usually my left hand, so I'm holding it in my right hand with 3 of my fingers on the inside like this. we still have coils on the inside, so I'm gonna do that. Because the shape of the pot is getting narrower, I'm gonna use my popsicle stick to kind of get the inside lines. You can also use your popsicle stick vertically like this as a tool. You see how I'm going vertically as opposed to little tiny strokes to erase the lines. That's also really a nice way to smooth out the clay on the inside and reach those hard to reach areas. All right, so we have the shape now based on our coil placement, and the walls are fairly consistent because the coils were a consistent size. So right now what we're gonna do is we're gonna start cleaning up the outside. All right, so I'm gonna place it down on the table gently, and I'm gently gonna start tapping out the sides. And what that does is it gets rid of the lumps and the bumps. But if you do it too hard, you're gonna lose the shape of your piece. I've got a few cracks around the rim. I'm going to use my fingers to get rid of those real quick. If you have stubborn cracks that really aren't going away with your fingers, use a little bit of water. Go around. Don't get it, again, too much water on clay is just going to give you a messy, gloopy, gloppy piece that's really hard to work with. But sometimes a little bit of water just does the trick. You can that got rid of a lot of my lines. You can even give your piece a little bit of a tap on the outside rim. Start. All right, and you can see there's little micro cracks here. Your thumb is the best first step in getting rid of those, but like I said, if they're stubborn and you're unhappy with the texture, absolutely use a little bit of water on your thumb. Get rid of them that way. But at this stage, the most important part is smoothing it and smoothing it and smoothing it and keeping the shape the way you want it to. All right, and it's really up to you as the artist here how narrow you want your piece to get. The very first coil that I put on this pot was already starting to angle inward. That means it was already, instead of being straight down on top of the rim, I positioned it on the inside of the rim. If you would like to work on your piece hours after you have finished it, just keep your eye on it. Keep it somewhere in the house where you can pass by it and feel it with your finger, and you'll start to notice the difference between the clay as it dries day by day, hour by hour. And you may want to do a little bit more smoothing as it gets drier. That's up to you too. Okay? So that's our finished piece for today. But like I said, you may end up with something that looks different and looks like this, and that's wonderful. And that's because you have your own unique way of making and your own sense of what we call aesthetics, or your own sense of artistic style. Okay? One last step before we're done. And you may want to wait until tomorrow to do this flip your pot over. Okay. All right, great job. Take care of yourself.